So my name's James Rutter. I'm really excited to be here. This is my second time at the EduFab Summit. And today, my last time I presented, if any of you were there, I spoke a lot about Haystack and some of the community work that we're doing, bringing digital fabrication into the classroom and also into the community. Today is kind of a report on the last 6 months of our of what we've been up to. I sort of alluded to that. We would be doing an after-school program this winter and spring, and so we've wrapped and we've been kind of reviewing some of our evaluations and feedback. And so I want to share with you some of the things that we've learned. The other thing I'll note for teachers that are attending today, that this program was intended to be in school and integrated into a kind of a formal classroom program, but just the constraints that we were facing with the school district and COVID protocols, we had to ultimately just shift it towards after school. So I think I would be really happy to have a dialogue around like how this could work in the classroom, since that is our ultimate vision for how we can structure this program. So that kind of gives you a little bit of what we're going to talk about, but I'll try to just skip through the first three parts. I'll talk about a little bit about who I am, about the organization that I work for, and the program that I run, which is essentially a fab lab that operates at the kind of a community. We're external to any kind of public, formal, governmental, or a school, and that gives us a lot of flexibility to collaborate and partner with public schools or private schools or whoever. And so I can talk about that, but really what I have highlighted is going to be the main thing that I talk about, which is this, how to design and implement an after-school program that we're referring to as Creative Makers. And I'll try to touch on some of the future work, what we're hoping to do, where we're going with this, and I am happy to geek out about any of these things. So, right. And finally, I'll try to have my eye on the chat, but I do feel like sometimes it's more of an organic flow as you ask questions to interrupt me. Just use the chat, and I will try to respond to things in real time. If I miss anything, then maybe later on we'll catch it when I officially stop talking. But anyways, all of that is to say, I don't want this to be too formal. Hopefully, if any of this piques your interest and you're wondering, you want me to drill down into more information, I am very much happy to do that. All right. So briefly about who I am. I started out thinking I was going to become an engineer working in industry, and quickly realized that that was not my passion, and my interest really lay in working with communities, between integrating technology and educational initiatives. And so I've always, since graduating, found myself working either with educators, with community organizations, libraries, museums, and these types of places. And so ever since about 2009 or 10, I've been in the sort of makerspace Fab Lab world, and I haven't sort of looked back. I keep finding myself. So AS220, if anyone's familiar with that, it's an amazing organization in Providence, Rhode Island. They are a arts organization. That's a theme of a lot of the work that I do, and a lot of the programming that we do here is around the arts and including creativity. So that's STEAM as opposed to STEM type of approach. And then after working for AS220, I decided to go back to school, but instead of engineering, I focused more on education. And so I got to work with a school district in Virginia, integrating digital fabrication into the K-12 curriculum. And I primarily worked with middle school teachers, in integrating digital fabrication into med science and also as a standalone elective that was in the classroom and students could take. And so that was primarily the focus of my dissertation. And then for 3 years in Maine, a remote part of Maine, working for Haystack, which I'll describe briefly. But I now run a Fab Lab program that has a lot of community and educational initiatives. And so that's going to be the focus of what I talk about. So if you're not familiar with Haystack, we are a school, but we are not necessarily a traditional public school. We're an arts organization that focuses on giving people a really intimate experience with making things. And so we're about 70 years old. We just turned 70 like 2 years ago. And we have focused on traditional methods of making around ceramics, wood, glass. And about a decade ago, we intersected with the MIT Fab Lab sort of Fab Foundation phenomenon that was emerging and established a technology center on our campus. And Haystack in and of itself has a very interesting model. We operate sort of in an inverted academic year, primarily because we are in Maine and the climate really only permits us to open our campus from May through October. The whole campus or the entire campus is basically just a cabin structure that you see here. Nothing is winterized. So we are very much beholden to the elements and the climate here. So it makes for a really interesting experience when you're trying to 3D print or laser cut and you're in a, it's really foggy, humid. There's a lot of sort of technical challenges that I'm happy to talk about, but I'll spare you right now. Anyways, we have a deep passion for educating people on the subject of how to make things. And so in this day and age, we have started to shift our thinking towards incorporating electronics and computer programming and digital fabrication, but we very much integrate that into traditional methods of how we made things, and we're very much combining those two things. And I kind of already skipped ahead talking, but we established the Fab Lab over 10 years ago. We have sort of the full comprehensive inventory of equipment. So the one thing worth noting is that our Fab Lab really services the school as if it was a library. So it's a central resource that everybody on campus has access to. So if you come to learn about glass blowing, you can use the Fab Lab to make a mold or to make a tool that you would then take back to your glass blowing workshop. Or likewise, if you're learning how to make pottery, which is one of the more popular studios that uses the Fab Lab, a lot of the times students will come and experiment with making tools, jigs, molds, any sort of assistive devices to add value to their workshop experience. And so that's been very much the mission at our school, but now we've been broadening out into community programming. And this photo shows you a view of inside the Fab Lab and what you might expect to see. There's usually some type of expert. We invite 12 leaders, experts from the Digital Fabrication Network, from the Fab Lab network. We invite them to reside on campus for 2 weeks during a session, what we call it, like it's basically like a workshop session. And anyways, they basically facilitate this integration and they work with artists and finding new methods of making. And so I'll just quickly jump through some of the examples, but 3D printing molds for pressing precious metals into, laser engraving forms to press metal into, where the final product is not necessarily the digital fabricated thing, but the digital fabricated thing is the means to make that beautiful object. And so that's often what we're doing here. This is cyanotype exposed fabric. with some 3D printed lens structures and some small little model houses made on the laser cutter are definitely most popular machine. And so now we're starting to hone in on why we're here, why at least I'm here, and my interest in this community. I think a lot of people here have, would agree that, but Fab Labs, I think, are a powerful framework for teaching. I think this dates back to, a lot of well-documented sort of philosophy on how we learn. The Fab Lab, I think, is a really great modern sort of uh, environment for learning where you can change content areas. And so anyways, we kind of subscribe to this, and we run a number of community educational workshops that start to actually intersect with things like the real world things that y'all are probably working on, like, K-12 education initiatives and community projects. And so we, I talked about this last time, which I think the video is probably posted somewhere, but today I'm going to be talking about a new program that we just recently designed and piloted that we're referring to as Creative Makers. And I think, makers has become this catch-all term that, for better or for worse, I think, we are all makers, and the United States has this wonderful history of making. And so I think this is not a new phenomenon, even though there is this new excitement and energy around make culture. I think it's a very deeply American thing that is in our culture. And so anyways, that's why we kind of call it Creative Makers. We're also an arts organization, so it seemed like a good term. But kind of stripping away some of that branding, it's really an after-school STEAM program that we kind of piloted. And so what I want to talk about is, how did we design it? How did we run it? I can show you the website, any of these things, but I thought it might be useful for educators, or if you're a community organizer, if you run your own makerspace. I thought this would be interesting to see, like, how one person approaches this from a kind of programming development standpoint. I think where, I don't know if anybody else feels this way, but I often feel like I'm the only one doing this type of work at my organization. So I'm usually like the Fab Lab guy wherever I go. And so it's a relatively new world, whether it's a maker space or a Fab Lab or whatever you want to call it. It's not like or at least I don't necessarily have a lot of colleagues that are deeply, identifying with like being a Fab Lab person or a makerspace person. So anyways, I always think it's helpful just to share out my way of thinking and approaching these programs. And I, hope you find this useful, but welcome your feedback. So what I'm going to kind of do is kind of take you step by step through how we designed this, how we implemented it, kind of some of the results. I'm kind of framing this up a little bit almost as if it's like a research proposal, but I promise it won't be hopefully too pedantic or academic, but hopefully more oriented towards usefulness. And so anyways, where do things start? Well, sometimes we start at the end and we back ourselves into a purpose or a goal. And so this may feel out of order as I describe it, but this is kind of how some of the dominoes fell. So with like a lot of new kind of community projects, we're seeking out funding, right? A lot of things cost money, and so you just have to find a way to fund them. Whether you're in a school, it's a new initiative, depending on how money flows through your organization. So we found this wonderful public health organization called Healthy Acadia, which is kind of we're right next to Acadia National Park, but it's a big kind of public health organization, and they, at the time of COVID, had a grant program called Downey's Partnerships for Success, where they were encouraging schools, public organizations, nonprofits to partner together to create experiences for youth to help with the growing problem of mental health, and especially, exacerbated by the COVID pandemic, but just how to engage kids, how to mentor them, and how to give them positive, enriching experiences. And for those of you in rural communities, you know that there's a growing, there's challenges associated with these communities. And so anyways, that sort of background of why we were, trying to do this was to help give students in a rural, remote part of the world new experiences and opportunities, to give them hope, and to give them something to look forward to. Taken for granted here. It's not something that, students here don't always have opportunities to do a STEM workshop. The schools here can be, under-resourced. And so these types of things just sometimes don't exist. So we set out to kind of reach out to the community, and see what's already happening and see how we can add value. And so Project Launch is a mentoring organization that we partnered with that focuses on this sort of 16 to 20-year-old age group, where a lot of kids are prone to dropping out of high school. They're prone to going to college, but realizing, they go to the 4-year kind of bachelor type program, drop out. Now they have a year's worth of college debt. They don't know what to do, and they're struggling. So there's this category of students that we're targeting, and Project Launch has already been doing a lot of work there. So there was a lot of overlap between what we were hoping to do with an after-school STEAM program and what Project Launch was already doing. Pioneer Prize is a coding competition that has an interest in inspiring and kind of cultivating the next generation of kind of innovative kind of software developers. And so it's a coding competition, so they have a bias towards software, but there's a lot of overlap between kind of software coding competitions and STEAM programming, as you might imagine. And then finally, or the two most important partners were our local high schools. We have two high schools, one on the island, Deer Isle, and then one right off the island on the peninsula, George Stevens Academy. And we set out to work with them to kind of make sure this was going to be something welcome and appropriate. And so the other sort of unique thing about our area is that we have two fab labs in the most remote part of Maine, which is one of the most remote, states in the U.S. So there's a fab lab sort of 15 miles apart from our fab lab, and so we partnered with them, since it's embedded into a school, to give more access to a fab lab. So, anyways, I spent a lot of time on this slide only because I think this work is really essential to do when you are dealing with community programming, even if it's within school. I think this to me is like where I spend a lot of the time, is like developing these relationships, building trust, so that we can work with kids and feel like this is all a positive experience, and not just go in assuming that we know what's best. So this kind of design, this is just a messy design phase type slide, but this is to get to show you that, like, we started planning what we would do, and this, is not anything revolutionary. This is largely inspired by the Fab Academy model, which I've always been excited about, adapting Fab Academy to something more appropriate for educational communities, and even just for non kind of graduate level communities, and artists being one of those communities. So we kind of just pitched it as a kind of like a mini Fab Academy Lite, semi-structured, where half of the program would be, kind of structured lessons, survey each tool or technology, from coding to electronics to all the different fabrication tools, and then pivoting towards kind of capstone project based. And we had aspirations to have some of those projects be collaborative and community focused, to actually start to aim that work back into the community, where we could help identify problems and issues that this program might help, or just add some real world meaning to the whole exercise. It was also important to us that this was like a completely free and open thing, which made funding really important so that we could cover costs and not push that onto the students, since a lot of the students that we work with come from low-income families. So anyways, this may not be relevant, but I think in the I like being transparent, and sometimes it makes things feel more feasible when you start to put numbers to it. And especially if you're going to be applying to a grant and asking, a local foundation or a private, donor to help pilot something and get stuff off the ground at your school or in your community. So the way that we structured this and asked for funding was we wanted to work with 2 high schools in the area. We wanted an instructor in both, to run both programs in 2 schools, and we wanted to cover travel expenses related to the program and project expenses. And we knew we needed to promote this and recruit, because we don't have this big sort of thriving culture of making and people that identify as kind of STEM savvy students, right? And we knew we were competing with high school students that are in theater, are in band, are in sports, are in other after school programs. So all of this stuff was just kind of, our best guess. And this doesn't include indirect cost of the facilities, of the fab lab. And so, and one of these instructors was myself. And so, I already have a job that, sort of this fell into the responsibilities of my job. But if I'm going to scale this and recommend another organization try to develop a program, I think it's good just to try to put a cost associated with certain things so that, it doesn't always have to be you, and that, we can start thinking about training the next generation of instructors, whether it's a prior student coming up from these programs or somebody new to a community that we want to engage and keep. It's something I'm always thinking about in a rural community where we're trying to attract and keep and retain this excited new generation. We don't have access to this hyper populated city of talented, exciting people. So we really have to either retain and support and give job opportunities to local people. So anyways, a lot of our model is very much, we feel like we need to always budget and pay people for the work and give them an incentive to learn this and do this work. And we can't really rely on a strong volunteer base of parents that send their kids to the school. So anyways, there's different approaches to this. And so these are just some of the challenges with the more remote rural school where we don't have affluent parents who may have the expertise and the time to donate to run an after school program. So this is also not, not too earth shattering, but we had to, let's see. Oh, I'll just get to that now. Please come back later on why you plan Scratch at week 1, and also how participants react to the fact that 3D printing is quite far in the schedule. So that, I do like that question, because it wasn't, and if you look at how Fab Academy is like kind of actually laid out, this doesn't follow the same logic. So Scratch being on day 1 was meant to be an icebreaker and a hook. Scratch is for kids that have never done anything in the coding world. Scratch is like dead simple to get started. You just make an account and you can just make a cat do noises and fun, crazy things. And so Scratch is like a quick hook into like letting the kids know that like they're gonna have some fun in this program. And with Scratch, now there's all these peripheral devices that are coming out that you can get into the real world, make interfaces, put that into your objects or whatever designs you're working on. So I think that was the reasoning for Scratch on week 1. The 3D modeling and printing being so late, that may have been an error. I don't know. I think 3D modeling and printing is slow. and can be like watching paint dry. It's exciting at first, but it is when you don't have a lot of printers in the school. You know, you're banking on kids having already invested in this and like understanding that there's like a time horizon there that they're looking across. So I think that we just parked it kind of later in the sequence. Although having the 3D modeling and printing skills early on, you know, allows them to start prototyping a lot more things quickly, but it can be more time intensive. Whereas like vinyl cutting and laser cutting is like quick rapid fire projects. So I like the quick stuff, the exciting stuff first. So I don't know if there's any educational theories to support that, but that's my reasoning. So anyways, we advertised, we recruited, and all this is really important for us. We were, you know, one takeaway that I'll mention at the end is that like students are just incredibly overtaxed with their attention, trying to be now hijacked from social media and your phone, but also just from like after school programs and all the busy things that high school students get into. So we had to spend a lot of time on that. So the program itself, I'll try to move a little quicker. We ended up going for about 14 weeks, about 12 sessions. The spring semester in our school system, it's just like craziness with COVID cancellations and vacations. It was kind of a mess scheduling wise, because we're operating after school. We're not like baked into the cake. 2 hours we had to actually, you know, halfway through we had to extend it. It originally was an hour and a half, which was just such a short amount of time to do anything digital fabrication. Especially once students get working on projects, they really need a good, like a 3-hour chunk of time would be like a great kind of good chunk. But like I said, we had 2 locations. We tried to do, if anyone's familiar with how Fab Academy works, there's one instructor globally broadcasting out to all the locations. So we did something similar. I was broadcasting out to the 2 labs from one of the labs. It was a little bit chaotic. That was another takeaway, was that slightly awkward. I don't know if we would do that again. We had about 10 unique students. So given our small student population, that was a large success, and 6 fully made it through the whole 14 weeks, which was also shocking that we got 6 kids to show up for 12 times.
So James, you have 15 minutes left. 15 minutes.
Yeah. All right. Time flies. Student projects ranged from all sorts of stuff that, you know, again, I gave them a lot of creative license. Programs called Creative Makers. Somebody was trying to make a realistic Pokeball that would open up when you threw it. Somebody was making a gaming soundboard, a solar clock. Some were more software oriented, so a Roblox obstacle course, a VR animation, an interactive model house using kind of Arduino electronics. So things that you might expect to see in a STEAM program. And something that I think we didn't get to, which is part of like something I feel really passionate about, is starting to work directly with the community. And so we had aspirations to develop some projects for our local elementary school, nature trail. This is one of the signs that we made, but it was sort of outside the scope of the after school program. It was with our high school interns. So that's something else entirely, but it was something I thought that would be eventually, once they do a personal project, they could switch to more of a group collaborative community project. All right, so some takeaway and findings. I'll wrap this up, tell you what I've learned, and give you some time to maybe grill me with questions. So the positives, I thought, you know, overall, it was a success. This is, if you remember, in the winter, we were dealing with still just waves and waves of COVID. Schools here were touch and go. Students were completely burnt out. So just anything getting them together to do something with their peers that was fun was a win. And so the students really appreciated that. A lot of the post-survey evaluations reflected this, saying that they enjoyed the experience, they appreciated learning new topics, and Many of them indicated that they wanted to keep doing this in the fall when they returned to school. And as a bonus, this is kind of sets us up for our summer internship program that we run here on campus at Haystack. Since most of Haystack's things happen in the summer, we like to hire high school students to help support the Fab Lab on campus. And so we recruited 3 of the 6 students to be our summer interns, and we hired them to basically be our tech support lab staff for the summer. And so this model is very exciting because it kind of serves as a training and recruiting platform for a summer internship program where they can get a job and continue doing this. And they see this as like something exciting to do. That's not just, nothing against, working at the local grocery store, but it's just something exciting and new for them to do. These are some student remarks that we captured from the survey, just, all reflecting happy thoughts, mostly about the program. Challenges. So I think this is all a really interesting thing to focus on, but, there's never enough time, just like this presentation, there's just never enough time to cover all this stuff. So I would extend this. My vision is to have this be fall semester and a spring semester. I think somewhat similar to how the entrepreneurship program from the prior session was structured. I imagine the fall being more of that like structured learning, jumping from topic to topic, doing small bite-sized projects, having them finish out the semester with some type of cumulative project, and then in the spring switching to the group challenging, complex, community-oriented projects. I probably wouldn't do synchronous with multiple locations. If we were going to scale this, maybe including people from around the country would be really interesting, but with just the limited kind of staff that we have and the small group of students that we have, it was helpful at some times, but it was mostly a logistical barrier. Recruiting and training new instructors is a huge challenge here. And so, it's mostly convincing people that anybody can do this. Some people think that they're not qualified to run a STEAM program. And so the real secret is just to that you just need to be one step ahead of the kids. And so we hired somebody that was fresh out of college who they had done some Arduino projects, but she really, she hadn't gone through Fab Academy. She wasn't like an MIT grad student, but she was phenomenal at engaging the kids in an after-school environment. And I think that's really the most important part. The content stuff, like somebody like myself supporting a program, I can, I serve that role. And so as long as you have some content expert, helping in the background, I think those gaps can be filled, but you really need somebody that you can convince and support and know that they're going to be just fine and they can do this. And then I mentioned this, but high school students are just crazy busy. I already talked about this. So big picture, where are we going? At the sort of teacher keynote panel, Mickey Flores, who we do a lot of work with here, she's one of the students that we started with. She's sort of in this area where we do a lot of kind of, the school system here has, nothing directly in the school. So Haystack really is that proxy to go into the school, take our resources in. And so we come in at the elementary level, we expose kids, get them interested. And then this is where we're doing a lot of work now, where we're trying to do after school or in-school programs, and then, have our summer internship program for job kind of workforce development. And we hope to start thinking about that post-secondary world, working with, graduated students, whether they're college bound or back from college, and we're trying to retain talented, creative individuals in a rural setting. So anyways, that I think is all I have. Looks like we have 8 minutes. So ask me some questions or don't.
I have kind of a broader question. I'm wondering, as part of like an organization that has a history, like a really strong history in like craft and maybe more kind of fine arts. How that informs the work you do with younger students?
Yes. I mean, the easy answer is that it completely informs everything that we do, because we, you know, art is such an expressive, way to engage students, and we feel like the arts is really powerful. It's also becoming more, I think, undervalued in society, and so bringing that back to the forefront, showing how much the role of arts can play in an educational experience, I think is really important. I think it may not sound as, I don't know, exciting to like NSF or whatever, but I think just having arts and excitement and expressive projects, getting kids excited to come and show up, I think is really important, and I think the arts can do that. And so yeah, Haystack as an organization just really values also, like, we nerd out about material and process, whether it's glass or ceramic or laser cut plywood. So I think we just love drilling down into the process of making, and we like to share that with students, because there is a lot to learn, whether it's material science or physics. Once you drill down into those, the nuances of making, there is a lot to learn. You just, at a high level, it may not seem obvious, but yeah.
Hi, James. I have a question for you. Thank you so much for the presentation. It was very, very interesting. I'm a high school teacher. I teach in a technical arts high school, Cambridge Ringen Latin High School in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I came in a little late, and I wanted to double check. I thought you said that you had worked with the MIT Makerspace folks. I took some workshops this summer with them, and they're fantastic. And also the Fab Academy. Are those the two, for your own sort of background? Is that the two folks that you've worked with to get your training?
So I worked with the MIT, the Center for Bits and Atoms. We have a close relationship with. Neil Gershenfeld was one of the founding partners of our lab. Like, he helped us. He helped us get started. He met with our previous director and convinced Haystack to build the Fab Lab. So that's the origin story. Myself personally, I have been in and out of Fab Labs and working with the Fab Academy group, whether it's just as a support kind of for, students or whatever, but I've just been in and out of this world for over a decade now. The MIT Makerspace group, I'm not familiar with. That sounds like something.
It's rare. It's relatively new. It's out of the Edgerton Center. They have a million labs, but it's fantastic. They do offer hands-on workshops for teachers to go over the tools. So Glowforge and Vinyl Cutter. Do we know? Yeah, it's fantastic. I wondered if that's what you were referring to, but you were not.
No, but I love connecting with new groups, sharing. I feel I'm like in my own little bubble silo up here, so it's always good to connect with other groups doing this work.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the presentation. It's fantastic.
Sure. Yeah. This is this type of summit event is like, I'm so happy that it's focusing on this, because I do feel like sometimes it all feels like we're just alone trying to figure this out. So it's nice just to have other people that are thinking about the same things.
Hi, James. I have a more practical question. So you have mentioned that you have some issues with the synchronous programs, so having the same education in both schools at the same time. Could you develop a little bit further which were the challenges that you've found and how you try to solve them?
So the slightly awkward thing about what we did was that ideally I would have found two independent instructors, kind of like how the global Fab Academy model is, that you have a local instructor, then you have this global instructor. The global instructor is kind of broadcasting out, and then the local instructors are kind of capturing all of that, helping to do that local. So I was both kind of the global and local for one group, and so it was just slightly awkward to like try to manage that sort of local energy especially since they're like young high school students that are socially awkward, and trying to manage that energy, and also broadcasting out to another group out there. It would have been ideal if we had another local instructor, but it was just, I think, a limitation of what we had in place. But it would be really interesting, this is just something to throw out there, and maybe I'll put this out there later on today, but yeah, if I think it would be interesting to do, I mean, there is something to the Fab Academy model where you have labs connecting synchronously or asynchronously, trying to all go through the same kind of experience, more or less. So I think if there's other schools or groups out there interested, it would be interesting to try to replicate that, I think, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, James.
Yes. Hi.
I have a question. This is Tammy here.
Yeah.
You hear me?
Yep. Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. I'm looking at your program, 12 weeks, and you've devoted 4 weeks for the open project time.
Yeah.
That's correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
more or less.
At which stage the students pick their project? Is it like early on, halfway through, or did they have to have a project in mind when they started? Thank you.
Yeah, I got it. So this was the theoretical model, and so once it makes contact with reality, especially kids, this changed a bit. So we tried to keep nudging them to like be thinking about it, but some students didn't really get to like the week 10, and then like we're like, all right, you really need to like pick something, because you should make something. They just kind of were doing the small bite-sized stuff. Let's make a vinyl sticker, let's laser cut a little figurine or whatever. So we did have to, it was a little bit like herding cats. But again, I wasn't trying to put the pressure on them to do that. So in a future iteration, I could reconfigure that, but that was roughly how it went. These last 4 sessions were more just local only, open lab time, kind of a free for all. That is kind of how it went. It was also good. I could like do one-on-one check-ins, like sit down with somebody and be like, all right, you're stuck. How can I help you? It was tough to do that in the beginning when you're just trying to like facilitate some learning. It's easier once everything becomes open lab, just to sit down with the student and work through an issue. All right, I think that's all we have.